There are two good reasons to ask a question, either to collect evidence that you need to inform your teaching or to cause students to think. Those are the only two good reasons. There's one very bad reason, and that is to create student engagement. Because what teachers do is to say, teachers say, now remember yesterday we talked about how plants made food? We had a big word for it, began with P. Anybody remember what it is? Photo. And it's kind of that guess what's in teachers' head, isn't it? It's like an extended closed procedure where you actually leave out words that students have to supply just to keep the students awake. Closed versus open. Now, you probably heard in college sometime that closed questions are bad and that open questions are good. Well, actually, that's not true. Certainly if you're teaching physics, which way does light go? Does it go from my eye to what I'm seeing, or from what I'm seeing to my eye? That's a pretty closed question because there's two answers, and one of them is wrong. The photons are coming this way. The reason it's a good question to ask is we know a lot of kids think that light goes this way, what's called the projective view of light. And so if you know what you're looking for, closed questions can be really good. If you don't know what you're looking for, then open questions might be more helpful. The more important distinction, much more important than whether it's closed or whether it's open, is whether it's low order or high order. Okay, so what's 3 threes? 9. Any different answers? 333, good. 33.3, okay, good.
Just 3, because they were all laid on top of each other.
Oh, yes. Yes, 3, just 3, yes. You're not very good at this, I have to say. You're not as good as year 5s. Let me give you some year 5 answers. 83. A flower. A small flock of birds. Now, when you thought I was asking what is 3 multiplied by 3, you were engaged in what psychologists call reproductive thinking. You trawl into your memory banks and you pull out a fact, and it causes no new learning. There is one slight benefit, which is that the recall of future facts, of that fact again next time, will be slightly faster. But that effect atrophies very quickly. When you realize I was asking for something else, your brain changed mode into something that psychologists call productive thinking. And that's when new learning takes place. So basically, new learning only takes place when you ask questions that cause thinking. The rest of the time, you're just rehearsing old learning. So the most important distinction between low order and high order. And if you're going to ask high order questions, you've got to give kids appropriate wait time. You know the research on wait time says that typically teachers allow about 0.9 seconds for children. You just got to slow down. It's really hard because every time the DCSF sends out a video on pace in lessons, they have these really impressive teachers, don't they, who are batting out questions and the kids are batting back answers, and it's really impressive. Don't confuse that with learning. Because those transactions are being conducted at such a speed that cognition is impossible. It's a very well-polished demonstration of an elaborate ritual completely disconnected from learning. Nobody can think at that speed, therefore nobody's learning at that speed. And pace, as often, requires you to slow down the classroom to get kids thinking a bit more than it does speeding it up. Now, we need to get away from IRE. IRE is what researchers call the standard classroom model: initiation, response, evaluation. I say something, you say something, and I say something about what you just said. I call it serial table tennis. Da-dunk, 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 da-dunk. Teachers scatter the questions around the room just to keep the kids awake. What I think we need more of is basketball. I ask you a question, I ask you what you think of her answer, whether it's correct or not, I'll pick on you for an explanation. So the idea that the questioning can go around the classroom in a much more random order. No hands up except to ask a question. Why is that so important? Here's why. The latest research on IQ shows that intelligence is caused by environment. Yeah? But environment causes intelligence, and intelligence causes environment. In other words, people choose for themselves cognitive niches that match their preferred level of functioning. So in the traditional classroom, when the teacher asks a question, there are some kids who are trying to answer every single question the teacher asks. Those kids are actually getting smarter. Their IQs are going up, in fact. And there are other kids trying to avoid being called on by the teacher. Those children are foregoing the opportunity to get smarter. So if you allow children to choose whether to participate in your classroom, you are actually making the achievement gap worse. Because you're actually allowing some kids to actually pull ahead and other kids just stay where they are. So if you're serious about equality of opportunity in your classroom, you must create an environment in which participation is obligatory. The decision that a teacher makes most often in the course of a working day is typically, can I move on now? And typically the way that most teachers make that decision is to make up a question on the spur of the moment. Some children raise their hands. You choose one of those. If that child gives you the correct answer, you say, good, and move on. And what we're saying is, let's think about the ways in which you can broaden the evidence base. How could you get teachers making better teaching decisions by broadening the evidence base? And that's what we call for in all student response systems.